California, that's been a leader in this thing, highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation. They didn't squeak past Alabama and Mississippi. They soared past them. U.S. Census Bureau data there. So think of California, Silicon Valley,
the richest guys
Hollywood, aerospace industry, most valuable real estate in the country, highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation. When you make energy more expensive, you hurt blue-collar people. You make everything in their life more expensive, and you take away the jobs. Blue-collar jobs tend to be energy-intensive jobs. So you have their jobs leave your state. Colorado is definitely going this direction. I think California is exactly.
Since oil and gas development is, well, on the wane here in Colorado, thanks to things like Senate Bill 181 and an anti-energy stance from our governor and our progressive legislature, I thought we'd find out what goes on in the oil and gas world. Chris Wright with Liberty Energy. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here, John.
All right. First, I want to ask you about this. So your company, Liberty Energy, bought a bunch of jackets for your employees. Everybody does these kind of things and had your logo on it. Where'd you buy them from?
North Face.
North Face. Beautiful, well-quality company. Then what happened?
Well, we wore them proudly for 2 or 3 years. Yeah, there's a couple thousand of them running around. They're proud endorsement of our company and of North Face, who I've been a fan of for a long time. Then this December comes around, and another company in our industry wants to get some jackets made for them, also North Face. And North Face says, no, we don't want to associate with your industry.
With
wouldn't
you
make them
guys.
Jackets. Right.
Yeah. So you're getting canceled even though you want to give your business to this company because you are in the evil, and I do mean evil business, of providing energy for people all around the globe. How you handled this, I thought, was spectacular. You thanked North Face. How'd you do that?
Well, we look at, and we've started a thing that I think we'll continue with, which is to honor extraordinary customers of our industry. And North Face checks all the boxes. You know, number one, all of the products they make, literally all of them, are made out of oil and gas. You know, nylon.
You're talking about the power for the factory, right?
No, not just that. Not just that. The actual material itself. The jackets we bought, the polyvinyl on the outside, the lining on the inside, literally all the material except the zipper is made out of oil and gas. It's also made with oil and gas, and of course it's used for activities only possible because of oil and gas. So North Face is sort of across the board. They're a company surrounded by our industry.
I've always found it fascinating that the activist enviros, the anti-oil and gas, anti-energy activists, are always touting products made from what you make possible. Everything we see here is made from either things that are harvested or mined. There's just no other way of building anything from the sand that made this to the wheat that made the whiskey. But they are using petroleum products in their tents, in their sleeping bags, in their backpacks, in everything they sell. That makes them a great customer for your company.
100%. For our whole industry.
So you honored them.
For our whole industry.
You honored them.
Absolutely.
How did you honor them?
We gave them an award, Extraordinary Oil and Gas Customer Award. They're the first ever winner, so that's, I think, a double
great.
honor. And I
It's
think
like the first Oscar.
Yes. Yes.
I just loved it. I loved it because, one, it showed the hypocrisy that they're biting the hand that feeds. That this is, it's like a guy who makes wool sweaters decides that it's wrong for people to own sheep. It doesn't make sense. But I think it did something bigger. And while you're having fun with it, it made a larger point. It made a moral argument in a fun way that what you produce, your product, helps people and gives people not only those jobs, but allows them to live the lives they live. And I don't think people really wrap their minds around that.
No, I think, we're one of those industries, I think, that you only miss us when we're not there. So when we're there and we are everywhere, people just don't realize it. And of course, we're going into this world that's more and more divorced from the enabling features of the world, and we're one victim of that. So yeah, I mean, look, is oil and gas appreciated widely in society? No, it isn't today. We're taken for granted and used everywhere. I would say even oil and gas protesting would be impossible without oil and gas. But
in order to get to the protest, you're in a car and you get there either by car, bus, rail, something that was powered by your product.
You're wearing clothes made out of oil and gas. You're holding signs and paints made out of oil and gas. You take the bus or train or car home. So I think look, we're an enabler of modern life. And I love modern life. People live longer. We got more opportunities. We get to sit in a nice studio and drink whiskey together. I mean, that's awesome.
And also, you don't realize it. We live here in Colorado thanks to energy. If we did not have sources of energy, we might be able to have some sort of nomadic lifestyle like the ancestors who were here before us and move around depending on the seasons. But most of the planet is largely inhospitable for us to live there and enjoy and experience without energy. Now, it doesn't need to be evil oil and gas. It could be something much more simple and wholesome, like cutting down trees, which is how we got energy in the first place. Cutting down trees would obviously be a much better plan than poking holes in the earth as you do.
And it was the source of energy throughout all of human history. It's only in the last 150 years that cutting down trees was not the dominant source of energy. Only quite recently. And yes, drilling holes in the ground and getting energy from elsewhere did have some side effects. We live twice as long today. Instead of 90% of us in grinding poverty, it's 10% and falling. We have modern medicine.
We eat because of poking holes. Before we were subsistence farmers, maybe we made enough to bring to market, but thanks to the product, thanks to the fertilizers, thanks to the transportation, thanks to combines the size of office buildings, we all get to eat. And we take that for granted as well.
We're bigger, taller, and stronger today because the majority of us aren't calorie deficient as we were in the past. Yes, food production, population's grown, but food production's grown even faster. Inder Golkani, a great development economist, originally from India, writes that over 60% of today's food production is only here because of oil and gas.
How much?
Over 60% of today's food production.
All right, so let's kind of go through this because I know there's somebody watching this going, look at these two bozos. Yeah, it's nice that we have energy, but we can get energy cleanly and safely and all those other places. I remember when Ronald Reagan was lampooned for saying there are more trees in the United States now than at our founding. And then it was found out, yeah, it's true because they would clear cut so much to be able to have the energy to stay warm at night. So we went from wood, and then we found coal, the first real fossil fuel. Tell me if I'm 100%. Wrong on this. All right.
Yes.
And then we found something that is smaller, that has more bang for the buck, more calories, if you will. If I think of energy kind of like calories, and tell me if it's a bad analogy, in that what we want to do is we want to get as many units of energy, heat, from whatever it is we're doing, whether we're burning wood, burning fuel, like coal, burning natural gas, splitting an atom, whatever it is, we're trying to get the biggest bang from that. Coal was a huge, huge advancement.
Absolutely. Coal saved the forests of Western Europe. It arrived a little too late to save the forests of England, a wet, lush country almost completely deforested by the start of industrialization. But coal arrived and replaced a lot of the use wood was in Western Europe before they lost all of their forests. So yeah, people say coal is dirty. I say compared to what? It's fantastic compared to burning wood or dung inside your hut.
Yeah, that simple question, compared to what? People would burn dung. They would burn wood. They'd be inside of a building where smoke and carcinogens are being released inside the building. That was a huge advancement. Coal has been, and I still say is, the best baseline fuel that the United States has. It's plentiful. It's easily to store on site so that if there's demand, like we saw in Texas, on natural gas and everybody's sucking it out of the pipes from everywhere. If you have 30 days of coal by your power plant, you're usually just fine. And that's why we've had great, cheap electric up until these crazy new mandates have come in. Talk to me a little bit about coal.
Yeah, coal, rewinding a second, John, you said we used to burn wood, dung, and huts. A third of humanity burns that today. 3 million people.
3 million.
3 million.
Billion.
3 million people die every year. 3 million deaths every year from burning wood, dung, and ag waste indoors.
Where do you get that, by the way?
World Health Organization.
Okay.
Very shady organization supported by the oil and gas industry. But that's WHO estimates. There's other estimates as high as 4, but I use the 3, the lower end. But in either case, it's more than the global COVID deaths over the last year. And it happens every year. It's declining because, of course, people are graduating from wood, dung, and burning ag waste, mostly to burning propane, exported from the United States, liquid petroleum gas. But people are trying to slow that down, trying to slow people's rise out of poverty for cleaner cooking fuels. But for electricity, coal is still the dominant source of energy globally. It was the dominant source of electricity in the U.S. really until the last 10 years or so, and natural gas has rapidly displaced it as number 1. Coal is still number 2. But globally, it's over 50% of all the electricity on the planet comes from coal. And electricity is essential to modern life.
Here in Colorado, still half of our electricity comes from coal.
Yes.
And so I see people who are tooling around in their Teslas feeling really good about themselves. And I'm like, well, you're driving a coal-powered car. That, if you think that solves climate change, I'm not certain about that. And this one really got me. I asked someone in the industry, what's happening to the coal that we're not using now, though, like Wyoming coal? And his answer was, we're selling it to China. Let me see if I understand this situation. We are digging coal out of the ground in Wyoming, in Colorado. We're putting it into diesel-powered trains, hauling it all the way to the coast, then putting them into diesel-powered boats, bring them all the way to China to go onto more diesel-powered trains to go be burned in power plants that are far less efficient and environmentally friendly as what was going to happen here. And somehow that Mother Earth feels better about that. I haven't been able to quite do the calculations on that one.
It is a curious logic. And what does that electricity do in China? It powers the factories that make the products that used to be made in Europe until they fought climate change and just push the energy-intensive manufacturing out of their countries over to China. Of course, we're going to do the same thing in Colorado and the United States here too.
Let me make a quick detour, and I want to get from coal to gas here, but let me make this detour. People are worried about climate change. I get it. I accept climate change. I understand that man-made activity adds to it. I don't think it's a single cause of it by any means. But I always ask this question. I don't believe that America needs to do so much on climate change because the people who are demanding it don't believe it themselves. I mean it this way. If, in fact, the sky is falling environmentalists believe what they're saying, they would be demanding today nuclear energy everywhere in the United States. They would be opening up as many dam projects for electricity as possible. And I always like to do this thought experiment. It goes something like this. All right, let's say you, environmentalist, you get your goal done. Every Western country plays by the rules. No more natural gas, no more coal. Everything is powered by sun, wind, and bunny flatulence, and the world is great. But China continues to build a new factory every week or every day or whatever they're doing, and they refuse to comply. If you believe that this is the existential crisis of our time, that the planet itself is at risk, do you support military action in order to get China to comply? And I submit, if the answer is not no, then you don't really believe in what you're saying.
Yeah, the actions, for the climate crisis have not at all indicated it's really about reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, for the points you just made. Look, the the biggest reducer of United States has reduced our greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis more than the next top 5 countries combined. And the dominant driver of
where do you get that? I'm going to keep asking you this question.
U.S. Department of Energy statistics. The per capita emissions of greenhouse gases in the United States last year, 1919 is the last full year we have data, 2019, are lower than any year since I was born. So yeah, we've been this sort of hero of driving down per capita greenhouse gas emissions, but you don't hear about it. And of course, it was dominantly driven by natural gas replacing coal in electricity production. And early climate campaigners were big fans of natural gas, but they aren't today, even though it is the single biggest needle mover for greenhouse gases.
It still has pollutants. Can we agree that natural gas puts out methane? It does have some pollutants, but in comparison to coal, it's a different process that pollutes generally a lot less.
Well, pollutant, I think in the word you're using is the wrong word. And in free market, people should never call it pollutants. SOx, NOx, mercury, there are real pollutants that harm human health, particulate matter being the biggest one. But greenhouse gases, dominantly CO2, is not a pollutant at all. In fact, with water vapor and oxygen, it's one of the 3 most essential molecules for life on Earth. It's odorless, it's essential to life on Earth. So it's not a pollutant, it's a greenhouse gas. So we could say, well, we want less of it. But calling it a pollutant is just a terrible,
I stand corrected.
Marketing campaign that's got youth today afraid they're choking and blah, blah, blah. They're confusing it with real pollutants. It is an issue for sure.
Talk to me a little bit about, we talk a lot about carbon footprint. Talk to me a little bit about geological footprint. We started off with deforesting lands, destroying the UK and a lot of America because we had to burn down the trees in order to stay warm. Then we started doing coal. Coal had a much smaller physical footprint. We dug down, and we've got a whole bunch of now reservoirs and lakes left over from the holes that were dug to get out the coal. Natural gas, oil, has even a smaller footprint, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The impact on the land, the energy density or the human impact has gotten just dramatically smaller, going from wood to coal to oil to gas to nuclear. The footprint of humanity in the United States peaked right after World War II. We have more grasslands and forests today than we did after the end of World War II, with more than 50% population growth, enormous increase in wealth, and it's for the point you're making. And also, higher density energy, oil and natural gas, allow us to produce food on a smaller and smaller footprint. So we're actually shrinking our human footprint and cleaning the air by using hydrocarbons.
All right, by the way, I shouldn't be the only one drinking. I'm going to look bad. Well, I look bad anyway.
Team player.
All right, so you oil and gas guys love this term, horizontal drilling. I mean, this is like between hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. It's like you found the lost element. Explain it to me in a way that I can understand. Horizontal drilling is a big deal because deep underground, roughly 2 miles underground, there's these 100-million-year-old rocks that are saturated with oil, that used to be these small microorganisms that lived in oceans. It got buried, it got sealed up, it got cooked into oil, and if it got left on the burner too long and got well done, it became natural gas. So these are trapped in certain layers of rocks. So with horizontal drilling, we can drill down 2 miles and then underground make a right turn and go out 2 miles. So we can drain the oil and gas, from 2 or 3 miles away from the location we're drilling. So people who kept saying, I'm tired of seeing, these wells everywhere and you're popping up everywhere. Now the technology is, instead of having 20 wells, you could have one wellhead and it can go out in a bunch of different directions. Is that basically it?
Footprint just keeps getting smaller. Footprint keeps getting smaller.
So hydraulic fracturing is also this other thing that you guys have gone crazy for, and it's the Viagra of natural gas and oil, because every old guy is talking about it. It's not an old technique. People wanted a long time ago to shake up these rocks to let oil and gas out. And I didn't realize it until recently. Colorado was the one and only site in the United States where an A-bomb was used for fracturing. I think it was in the 70s or late 60s. I'm trying to remember.
Yes.
The Department of Energy was going to make...
Western Colorado.
Yeah, they were going to make it a wonderful way for the bomb to help us. And basically, you do that, but you don't use A-bombs. You use explosives 2 miles down. And if I understand it right, you crack open the rocks, which make fissures, and then the oil and gas, both of them, come seeping through much more easily.
Exactly. And the explosives only play a tiny part. They're just to make a tiny hole through the pipe that's underground. Hydraulic fracturing is really hydraulic from the name. It's just pumping water. We have pressures at the surface, and we're pumping water down into a rock that it can't easily go. So the only way that water can flow into that rock is to crack it and form a little fissure that the water flows along.
And then you suck that water out.
Yes.
All right, let me talk about that because this is something your opponents hate. They call this, this fracking fluid that comes out. It's not something you want to feed to your grandkids, is it?
Well, the chemicals we pump underground now, almost all the frac fluids we make, I can make from Whole Foods ingredients. Now, you shouldn't drink them as a course of habit, because some of it are like Visine.
I know governors and senators who drink it on a pretty regular basis.
I've drunk it as well for the video effect, so you can. The worst part about the water isn't actually what we put into the water. It's just water that's been underground, 2 miles underground. It's very salty, and it's not potable water, and in fact, it's much more deadly than the fracking chemicals we pump underground. Are much more dangerous. See, the best thing to do when you produce that water up in the ground is just inject it back under the ground where it came from. And that's how the vast majority of the produced water from oil and gas production, it just gets pulled out of the ground, separated, the oil goes to the oil pipeline, the gas goes to a gas pipeline, the water goes to a water pipeline, and it's injected deep underground in the 100-million-year-old rocks it came out of to begin with.
Really? So it goes into the same place that the oil and gas was, that same level, or is it a different...
It could be deeper, it could be shallower. In some places it actually is the same layer, but generally not. But it goes deep underground.
Continuing on water, you put this hole in the ground and you go down 2 miles. I mean, we're the mile-high city, so imagine this, another one up. That's a long way down, and you go through some pretty sensitive areas. That sometimes you go through, it looks like aquifers and where people get their well water and other things. That's got to contaminate those parts of the earth, doesn't it?
Yeah, so the top, it doesn't, but it's a very legitimate concern. The top few hundred feet, sometimes as deep as 1,000 feet or more, is fresh water. That's the water we're going to use to farm, we're going to drink, whatever. That's what aquifers are. They're rocks full of fresh water. So when we drill through those shallow layers, we drill a big hole, we put a big old steel pipe in, cement the outside of that pipe, then drill another hole inside of that pipe that also gets cement isolated. So we do a lot of protection techniques to make sure that what we're doing 2 miles underground doesn't hurt the water that's 300, 400, 500 feet underground that we use. And CSU, one of our great local universities, has put in monitoring networks all throughout the Denver-Julesburg Basin, the big oil play right outside of Denver here, to monitor, are we indeed getting chemicals or methane into that? And of course, the results are tremendous, that we're not.
Right. But it's a wonderful scare technique.
Very effective.
You see the guy in the film turn on his faucet and light the water on fire, and it's like, yeah, but that has nothing to do with the natural gas you're pulling out, where he's getting his water. He's getting his water in some place that's hitting methane, but that's not because of oil and gas, right?
No, one of those scenes in the Gasland movies was right here in Colorado. Because in the water aquifers we draw from here in Colorado, there's coal seams in it. The town of Superior, just south of Boulder, is named after this Superior coal mine. So this is shallow coal in the aquifers. If you drill a water well and don't isolate just certain zones and you produce from all of it, you'll produce methane gas, and you can light it on fire just like that.
And that's not the drilling you do. You're not drilling for water.
No. We're drilling much deeper with cement and isolating it.
We're talking about some of the moral arguments on energy development. You and I are both old enough to remember that it was science fiction that the United States could become energy independent. We had to go to wars all over the world and get involved in Middle East politics because we would be connected to OPEC and other nations. We could never become energy independent. And that was a huge national security issue. It's one of the reasons administrations used to say we need to stay involved in foreign affairs and send our guys over in weird wars to do terrible things. We are energy independent thanks to hydraulic fracturing and horizontal drilling. It has been a game changer to the point, tell me if I'm wrong on this, we are now a net exporter of a lot of oil and gas?
We are a net exporter of natural gas. We are roughly break even on oil, but we are a net exporter of all energy. For the first time since 1954, the United States produces more total energy than we consume. And our rate of exports is growing, particularly in the natural gas world, at a pretty good clip. But you talked about we were worried about Middle East wars and security. Look, I was in high school and junior high in those times, in the late 70s and the early 80s. And modern civilization was going to come to an end. People wouldn't get lifted out of poverty because energy was going to be so expensive. I went to MIT specifically for this reason, to work on fusion energy, because we knew we were running out of oil and gas.
Right.
I went to MIT to work on fusion energy. I ended up going to graduate school at UC Berkeley to work on solar energy. And I went back to MIT for graduate school. And then after graduate school, I worked in geothermal energy. So I'm not an oil and gas guy. I don't care where energy comes from. It's just got to be plentiful, reliable, affordable, and make human lives better.
All right, that's amazing. Next time, lead with that. So you studied all these other ways to do it. All right, we're probably roughly the same age, and I remember, the No Nukes concerts and the nuclear energy when we were young was going to be the savior of everything. Up here in Colorado, we had the St. Vrain nuclear power plant, which I think was one of the rare helium-cooled plants, and it never really worked. And they closed that down. And we were going to have cheap electricity. That's why there's some homes and even parts of our building that are still electric heat because it was going to be so cheap.
Yes.
Too
cheap to meter was the line in the 50s.
I remember that.
Too cheap to meter.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Now it's more and more expensive. I've looked at the utility bills over and over. And utility companies are thrilled whenever we have a new clean energy mandate because it means they get to buy two things and charge it to you. You have a coal plant, and now we're going to have a natural gas plant. I know you guys like that, but then we're amortizing both of them and raising our rates. New mandates come, they raise our rates. Xcel Energy is not in the power business. Xcel Energy is in the building crap business, so they can double bill us. I think it was a mistake when your industry pushed for fuel switching. This was 10 years ago or so. I think it was
Aubrey McClendon teaming up with the Sierra Club in the Beyond Coal campaign. I agree. It was shameless.
It was shameless. It was shameful that Republicans signed on, that Republicans consultants signed on, and what it did is exactly what the anti-energy crowd wants, which was to divide fossil fuels and kill one at a time. They know how to do this. It's divide and conquer, and they've done it with coal. Talk to the folks up in Craig, Colorado. And to be honest, I am furious with your industry for letting that happen, and I'm furious with your industry for not investing long-term in the morality of energy, but always in the short term of we can pass this bill, we can fight this bill, we can fight this initiative that's coming up without the underlying change in culture. As I always say, politics is the lagging indicator of culture. And coal thought, well, we'll win because we're right. Oil and gas had more money, but they're going to win because they're always thinking about the next quarter and the next election. But you guys didn't work on changing the hearts and minds and getting out the real story. And I think Colorado is seeing what's happened because of that. How do you take that criticism?
Yeah, look, I don't like the over-politicization of energy, and I've never been a part of it myself. Our companies are called Liberty for a reason. I'm a passionate free market guy. This is what lifted people out of poverty and enabled the modern world. I want energy sources to compete in a marketplace, and who's ever the best, the cheapest, the cleanest, the most reliable wins. And so that campaign was before its time. Market forces ultimately are what really have led to the decline of coal, because natural gas became cheaper than coal. That's why natural gas has really taken over. It also emits less pollutants, lower greenhouse gases, but it's mostly won in the marketplace because it's cheaper. It's had some political help for sure, pushing and beating up on coal plants. I'd rather not have that. I don't like to see that. And again, as you pointed out, it's just moving coal electricity offshore. It's not getting rid of coal electricity. But we should want energy sources to compete in the marketplace. The problem is electricity is complicated. And wind and solar provide a product that people don't want to buy. When you turn on your light switch, you want it to go on. When you turn on your washing machine, you want it to go on. Wind and solar don't provide that.
Let me complain about your industry again. Your industry doesn't mind wind and solar, because when you do wind and solar, you have to build backup generators that are mostly natural gas generators. So when I said Xcel we get to pay for the old Comanche plants, and then we get to pay for the new replacement, which is natural gas, that's one thing. When they do wind and solar, we get to pay for that, but then they also have to pay for a backup generator, backup transmission lines. You have to have two systems. So I have found that a lot of folks in your industry have been kind of quiet about taking on the new energy mandates because get to sell more natural gas as backup.
Well, I think, look,
is it fair or not?
It's fair, but it's more because business people in general are pragmatists. They don't stand nearly as much as they should on principle. We're not going to win that argument. That's coming anyway. Let's appease a little bit. And yes, the only way you can firm wind and solar right now is with natural gas or hydro. Nobody's building any new hydro in this country. We have a fair amount, but no one's building any new hydro. So all the firming in the future is natural gas. In the clean energy transition projections, there's a growing consumption of natural gas. So the criticism is mostly fair. My contention is to look at what's actually happened. You know, the thing we hear all the time is wind and solar are cheaper they're cheaper. We're going to them because they're cheaper. So I show a plot in a lot of my talks. Wind and solar installed capacity per person and retail electricity rates. It's an amazing correlation. Everywhere they've put in more wind and solar, everywhere electricity prices have gotten meaningfully more expensive for the reason you said. They don't displace natural gas or coal. They just make them have to turn on and off a lot when the wind is blowing and when the sun is shining. But all those plants still need to be there. They all need to be paid for. And they're run less efficiently now.
And they're not run efficiently. There's not the same base load. And when wind and energy only survives because of mandates, it is the only reason it's there. But it feels good. I told you before the show that I used to be an anti-gun guy because it felt right. Emotionally, it felt right. Wind and solar feels right, and therefore it must be right. But I don't care if it's wind, solar, electric, or nuclear. I don't care as long as it's the cheapest, most affordable, most sustainable power out there. And I think a lot of people think that guys like you are pushing your product, and you have to. But really, from a policy point of view, if wind and solar worked,
I was a solar guy.
Yeah.
I was a geothermal guy, and becoming a geothermal guy again, a little bit. Will wind and solar ever really be plentiful, cheap, and reliable? That on an equal playing field, here's the thought experiment. End all the subsidies. And oil and gas gets subsidies, let's end those subsidies as well. End all the subsidies. Can wind and solar be cheaper and more reliable
than fossil fuels.
No, it would never happen.
Never.
With wind, no. We'll hit peak wind when we stop subsidies of wind power. A wind turbine lasts less than an oil well and takes somewhere between 10 and 100 times more steel and cement to produce the same amount of energy as an oil well. Cement and steel are not renewable. Calling them renewable, of course, is a crazy marketing campaign. The blades are made out of tons of oil and gas.
Right.
There's 100 tons of coal inside the tower of every wind turbine, and hundreds of tons of coal used to get the 100 tons of coal inside of the tower. That's what steel is. It's just iron with carbon inserted inside.
And it doesn't always work. If the wind is too strong, it doesn't work. If the wind is too soft, it doesn't work. And as we found out after our last cold snap throughout Texas, if it's too cold, it doesn't work. So it's let me put out this prediction. This is my Star Trek prediction. I believe solar will beat wind eventually as a more reliable source of energy, as nanotechnology and other things change. It could be decades away, it could be centuries away, but I don't see how wind could ever be more than a add-on to an electric portfolio.
I agree. I'm much more bullish on solar than wind, mainly because it has a 10 times higher energy density than wind, meaning for the same amount of land, you can get 10 times as much power out of it. What's the most fundamental limit on the surface of the earth is land. So energy density is essential for energy systems. So yeah, solar, I've been a fan and have been involved in solar for decades. I doubt it's ever a giant source of world power, but I mean, it could get to 10% of world energy someday.
Well, and also as conservation and technology reduces demand. The lights that are on, I used to do lighting as a profession, theater lighting and stage lighting. These are LED lights, and they're cool, and they are a fraction of the old incandescent lamps that we used to use for video shoots, which were remarkably hot and sucked a lot of power. This is what I can't get. When I hear, and help me with this question. If you look over the last 20, 25 years, the demand for electricity has never been lower than it is right now because of these technological advances. At the same time, the price of the inputs to make electricity, coal and natural gas, have never been cheaper than they are right now. So, pardon me, I took a few econ classes. The demand has never been lower. The supply of the product that makes it has never been more abundant. Prices should be rock bottom on my electric bill, more cheaper than they've ever been in my life, but they're more expensive than ever. Why?
Government mandates, and desires to remake our energy system, to build a second, less reliable, intermittent energy system to layer on top of the energy system we have, which also needs new grid investments, new stability investments. Look what's happened in California and Texas. If you mess with electricity, the result so far has been more expensive, less reliable. That's not a great selling combination. But I'll question one thing you said, John. There's sort of an efficiency paradox. Everyone thought if we could make cars get twice as many miles per gallon, well, then we'll only buy half as much gasoline. It never works that way. What happened was when you made cars get twice as many gallons, college students drove 500 miles to go climb a mountain, or to go ski, or to do more adventures. I worked in the semiconductor research when I was in graduate school. And when we made transistors cheaper and cheaper, it didn't mean we spent less on transistors. It meant we bought a lot more because we could do more things with them. So energy, if you make it cheaper, people want to use more of those things. So in the rest of the world, the demand for energy and electricity globally is growing at a significant clip, and it will continue to grow at a significant clip. We are highest ever demand for world electricity this year, and we'll beat it again next year for sure.
Why? But that's not true in the United States. World demand is at an all-time high. Demand here is not at an all-time high.
Plateaued. It's plateaued the last 15 years.
Okay. So while our population continues to grow and our production continues to grow, it's really pretty remarkable. let's bring it all full circle here. Why is it that generally we get this wrong? Why is it that oil and gas is the villain, that coal is the villain, that here's the thing that has lifted more people out of poverty? Capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty, but there is a energy poverty that is killing, as you said, 3 million people a year. And this side of the argument, this side of the story, the moral side of the story, hasn't even woken up and get out of bed while it's getting crushed by the other side. How did that happen?
World is complicated, and things that are successful tend to be resented. Like, what are the two most resented things today? Capitalism, that made us all wealthy and makes our lives possible, and oil and gas, that has the same mantra. Things that are very successful become resented, and then that snowballs. Today, it's almost a search for meaning. There's much less faith and belief, in a meaning of life, and people look elsewhere for meaning. Climate change, which I've been involved in for 20 years, I've been speaking on it for 20 years. Of course, it's a very real phenomenon, but it's just so wildly misrepresented all the time by politicians and the media because they don't really care about climate change. But it is a reason that they are saving the world from you and I. That's meaning, that's purpose, that's direction.
I always look at, and maybe it's because it's where I operate, the intersection of politics and media. When we were kids, we'd watch the Beverly Hillbillies, and up come from the ground come bubbling crude oil, that is, black gold Texas tea, and that was a good thing. And these hillbillies all of a sudden got this rich life, which, by the way, still happens because so much of the land that you guys poke holes on are farmers and ranchers who might be land wealthy but are cash poor, and the royalties that they get from this have transformed their lives too. So Jed Clampett still lives in a different incarnation. But now it is so vilified, it's almost comical. I watched a Muppet movie with my kids, and my little kid, and he loved it. And of course, the bad guy was Tex Richmond, oil baron. There's never a good oil man in this story, ever. You're all evil. You are all evil. Even though you've given us this product that has saved lives, that have kept us fed, you're evil. And I go back to the point, it's because your industry takes it for granted. And I think the business cycle thinks about the next quarter, the next year, and the guys who are in charge think, these problems, as you said, well, we're going to have to mitigate this bill, we'll make it less bad. That's going to get me until I'm retired from this company, and I'll get but there's never been something that says it is our duty to make a moral, long-term, cultural argument about what this industry is, what the truth is about its environmental impacts, and how it saves lives. And when you guys do it, I'm sorry, you guys do it in these ham-fisted ways that just come across really poorly. And I hate to say it, but part of me thinks you guys did this to yourselves. And I see 181 pass in Colorado, destroying oil and gas. It's going to run it out of this state over time. And my heart just breaks for the men and women who rely on it. It breaks for those of us who demand the supply. But if it wasn't for that, the tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars Colorado Oil and Gas has spent in the last 4 years, the mismanagement and just the consultants that are buying houses with it, I find that shameful. That's my criticism.
Oh, look, 40 years ago, when I was a kid in school, I knew one thing for sure. Oil and gas was bad, the people in it were bad, and I was going to dedicate my career to getting rid of it. So I've been wrong a lot.
All right, so the way I felt about guns, and I wanted to get rid of guns, and now I'm a life member of the NRA, you felt the same way about oil and gas. I find that fascinating.
That's what I learned growing up. And I was a tech nerd. I say science geek turned tech nerd. I went to college to work on fusion energy to fix that problem. Continued with solar and geothermal. So look, energy just matters. It fundamentally matters. For every other industry is built on the energy industry. So we're sort of this basic infrastructure, mostly invisible infrastructure in the planet. And we've been terrible at PR. In the old days, we didn't do it, right? We just got demonized and everyone just kept their head down and you didn't even tell someone you worked in oil and gas. Now we've tried to engage, and as you rightfully pointed out, we've generally been terrible. I have a very different style, and it'll probably be wildly ineffective too, but I'm unabashed in my views about energy.
You are something
and
different.
About what the story is.
You are something different in this, in that you make a cultural argument, you make a moral case about this, and using science to back it up. It's not what, if oil and gas did what you're doing, we wouldn't be in this predicament. I'm worried about my kids. I'm worried that they're not going to have the energy they need to have a vibrant economy. China will, and I'm concerned about that in the long run. I think it is dangerous, and I see what the new administration is doing, demonizing you even further, and doing more to point us in the wrong direction. And Colorado will become California with rolling blackouts if we keep doing what we're doing.
California, that's been a leader in this thing, highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation. They didn't squeak past Alabama and Mississippi. They soared past them. U.S. Census Bureau data there. So think of California, Silicon Valley,
the richest guys
Hollywood, aerospace industry, most valuable real estate in the country, highest adjusted poverty rate in the nation. When you make energy more expensive, you hurt blue-collar people. You make everything in their life more expensive, and you take away the jobs. Blue-collar jobs tend to be energy-intensive jobs. So you have their jobs leave your state. Colorado is definitely going this direction. I think California is exactly. If we want to have war on low-income people, which is always my message to Colorado politicians, that's what we are doing. We are waging war on low-income people. You talked about your kids. Your kids will always have energy. You can't go to an oil and gas protest or build a wind farm without a ton of oil and gas and a ton of energy. So they'll always be around. What's going to happen is they're just made to be more expensive. And that, to wealthy people, they don't notice it that much, and I guess they feel hipper at the cocktail parties. But to blue-collar, to low-income people, to recent immigrants and low-skilled jobs, it is life-changing by making energy more expensive. This is a massive political problem in Germany. Massive. In the United Kingdom, by their own public health data, they kill 26,000 people a year because of the increase in electricity prices they've driven by their climate change legislation. And the other distinction of the United Kingdom, they're the #1 importer of CO2 emissions in the world. They just sent their industry to China and overseas. They still use energy-intensive products. They just don't make them there anymore.
Which will do it in a much more environmentally damaging way. China does it. This is why pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, I enjoyed so much. Even though we still stuck with all those targets, we still hit all those targets. Anybody who believes China is going to tell the truth on what they're doing is high, to the point that people in the oil business have to rely on satellite data looking at their storage tanks in China to get an idea what the global supply of oil is, because they don't trust what the government is putting out. They have to verify it with private satellites. I find the whole thing fascinating. Let me wrap it up with this. You said you believe in climate change. This is an issue.
Believe is the wrong word, of course. It's not a matter of faith.
Belief,
it's a matter of data and science. But for most people, they don't bother with the data.
The climate, as it has always been, is changing. Is it changing more rapidly? I'll leave that to others to decide. But for those who believe that this is an existential threat, what you're saying seems to be contradictory. Because even if it's more expensive to do the feel-good stuff, even if it means that we go back to the Stone Age and we all live in huts, it saves the planet. Tell me how Liberty Oil, Liberty Energy, oil and gas help us fight climate change?
So first, it's put the matter in perspective. When there's problems, we want to solve them. But a key thing is our solution more damaging than the disease? The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN bureaucracy set up to write. They're the recognized authority, even though they have a bias, of course, to grow the issue, because that's what they do. But let's just take their numbers. Their numbers, they do economic analysis as well. So 2 degrees C warming, the target of the Paris Climate Accords is to keep us below 2 degrees C warming. We've already warmed 1 degree C. We're warming at about 0.14 degrees C a decade. So 70 years from now, at the current rate of warming, 2090, we should hit 2 degrees C warming. Could be sooner if the warming accelerates, could be slower if the warming decelerates. 2 degrees C warming, they do extensive economic analysis. The range of impact to per person income, if we do nothing on climate change and let 2 degrees C happen, they have a wide range, somewhere between 0.2% and 2% reduction. So it's like a very modest recession sometime in the next 70 years. That's the climate crisis, according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. No one actually reads this stuff. So to politicians, they got someone who actually knows that's the conclusions, but they want to use it for other things. So the math right now is we're spending hundreds of billions of dollars pushing people into poverty and reducing life changes for immeasurably small changes to greenhouse gas emissions. That makes no sense at all from anyone's perspective. So climate change is real, and of course, we are naturally decarbonizing as well. We went from wood to coal to oil to natural gas. I'm a huge fan of nuclear. For sure, we will go to nuclear. Naturally, without government mandates, U.S. greenhouse gas emissions are declining. They're not in poor countries, but they'll peak and they'll eventually decline. New technologies might accelerate that. You could have some tax incentives, some research incentives to further speed up the problem. I'm not opposed to doing things on climate change, but things we're doing today, they're not productive on climate change, but unfortunately they're very productive in making people poorer and shrinking people's choices and opportunities. No one would rationally accept that policy. But again, politicians are not making rational arguments based on data or economics. They never have. But now they've got too many people swept up believing this is making the world a better place.
Progressives say they are there to help the poor. I have found overwhelmingly their policies, including on this one, hurts the people they claim to be helping, most of all. People want to get more information. Where's like a really good place for them to go and learn more?
You know, at our website, LibertyFrack, no K, libertyfrack.com, there's a bunch of YouTube talks or articles or presentations. I'm a lifelong energy nerd, but most importantly, energy to lift people out of poverty and make better lives. So a lot of young people, they share that passion. They want people out of poverty. They want people to have richer and better lives. So their hearts
a lot of people don't. Let's be honest, a lot of people don't. I would say the youth,
I speak at universities, their heart is in the right place. It's just, look, if you've only heard one thing all your life, well, of course you would believe that. So my thing is just to have people engage, pursue their passions, but make sure what you're advocating is actually advancing the causes you believe in. Most of the time it isn't, but keep that passion to make the world a better place. That's fantastic.
Very, very, very last question. If I got $1 and I want to invest it, is the oil and gas industry as of end of March 2021, is it a good place to put $1?
It is a pretty good place to put $1. It was a compelling place to put $1 12, 10, 11 months ago.
When everything hit rock bottom.
When everything hit rock bottom, right? The stocks in our industry have doubled since then. The oil and gas prices more than doubled. So when people panic and they think something's over, that's when you want to invest in that. When they love something and they're convinced it's the future forever, you don't want to invest in that. Manias always swing. Generally invest against the crowd. I end with one other point. All this bad stuff about oil and gas. 2019, the last year we have full data for, oil and gas supplied the largest percent of U.S. energy consumed ever.
Ever.
ever. Our industry's declining. Aren't we rapidly being displaced? Ever. Highest market share ever in 2019. Pretty certain 2020 will beat their 2019 record, and 2021 probably will as well. So a lot of pressures against our industry. But as far as energy we're bringing to the American public, not only is the amount higher than ever before, the market share is higher than ever before.
Done more cleanly than it's ever been done.
Done more cleanly, done more efficiently. We're exporting
Well, I can see the problem. I can see why they want to put you out of business. Hey, Chris, thanks so much. This has been incredible.
Thanks, John. Great being with you. Thanks for what you do.
Cheers.
Thank you. Better lives.
If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button too. You don't want to miss a single show.